What does carpet manufacturing and health and fitness have in common? Not much. But for Todd Vande, the CEO and founder of Stark, an unwavering commitment to excellence has made him successful in both areas. He has an interesting journey, and this is a special episode for me because I've worked for Todd for years, and it's fun to sit down and hear it front to back, the ups and the downs, and where Stark is at and where it's headed today.
Hey guys, this is Jessica Watts, and this episode of Sea Life is brought to you by Stark in the OC. Here we share the stories, struggles, and triumphs of CEOs of the brands we all know and love. If you listen to your podcast on iTunes, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating. If you have an Amazon Echo, just say, Alexa, open AnyPod and play the Sea Life podcast.
What's up, everyone? This is another episode of the Sea Life.
Learn from everyone you can. Learn of what your interests are.
Yeah, I was making $3.75 an hour. That's what it looked like.
Being an entrepreneur is like jumping off a cliff and building a plane on the way down.
We know the names, we recognize the brands, but how do CEOs and entrepreneurs build successful companies? That is the story we want to tell. Todd Vande, President and CEO of Stark and World's Best Boss. Todd, it's fun to have you here.
It's great to be here with you, Tyler. And it's great to have this level of eye contact.
Yeah, we're sitting face to face. This is fun.
Knee to knee. We're actually touching knees.
Despite the fact that
I'm not uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, we would never be uncomfortable. So we're excited to do this, for one, because I like you and you're my boss.
I like you too.
But also, I've heard lots of different pieces of your story in, snippets here and there in conversations over the years, but it'll be fun to hear it kind of beginning to end. So tell us a little bit about where you're from and kind of how you got started in business.
Well, originally from New Jersey, went to high school and college in Minnesota, started my career in Chicago, but spent the vast majority of it here in Southern California. So
what did you study in college?
Studied business and English and had a minor in fine art.
Really? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I hear you're actually a talented painter.
Not really, but I understand it.
You understand it.
Things like composition and color and stuff like that.
So you graduate college in Minnesota and you move right to Chicago?
I spent a few years in Minnesota and actually one of those few years in Fargo, which was a miserable, it's just exactly what you would expect. No offense to those living in Fargo and listening to our podcast up there. And then moved to Chicago shortly thereafter.
Okay, and what were you doing?
Moved to Chicago actually to turn around a painting contracting business, which was, frankly, way over my head. I mean, it was the first time I ever ran a business, never had any experience. I was 24 years old, and it was so challenging and so difficult that I actually slept in my office Monday through Thursday. My days were that long. Oh, this is kind of funny because of the business I'm in currently, I ate at McDonald's 3 times a day because it was the fastest drive-through.
Oh, my God.
It was I can't imagine what my health looked like. I felt miserable. I was exhausted. I would go to the gym in the mornings to take a shower, not to work out, and then go to the McDonald's drive-thru for breakfast. It was rough.
Wow. So you were so you got this. You were turning it around. So this was a company that was struggling.
Yeah. It was a business that had 3 different business units. One in Ohio, one in Minnesota, and one in Chicago. It started in Chicago, and it was with the original college painting contracting business, and actually one of the first employees was Jim Belushi.
Really,
yeah. So it was falling apart at this point. It was whittled down to, I want to say, 10 employees, and was just floundering financially, and I mean, happenstance dropped the opportunity in my lap. I said yes to it, moved to Chicago for that job. And had an amazing experience learning all about how to run a business with an exceptional mentor, by the way, who was located in Chicago as well, who kind of supervised my progress.
So did you turn it around?
I did. It took 3 years. By the time I was done, we had a couple hundred employees. There were full-time temporary employees because of the seasonal nature of the business. and was performing well financially. But it was just every moment of it for me personally was miserable. I just never really gelled with what the business did.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so then what happened after that? So you turn it around, and then was there already an exit planned, or you just kind of got over
I
it?
didn't own the business. I was an employee.
You're an employee.
Yeah.
So
So the business was continued. The ownership continued, and I resigned, and somebody else took my job, and that was pretty much it. Yeah.
and did you resign because you didn't like it, or did you have something else you were headed towards?
I resigned because I didn't like it, and I had something else I was moving toward. So when I was in Minnesota, I worked for a sales agent, which is similar to the insurance business, where you have independent sales agents representing a broad range of insurance companies in small manufacturing environments that are sort of niche or boutique. Like the sales force tends to be independent, and I worked for an independent manufacturer's rep. And I covered all the parts of the Midwest that he didn't want to go to. He had a couple of kids. I think the third was on the way. He's a wonderful guy. Actually, he was a mentor for sales. He was an amazing salesperson, and taught me all the basics surrounding sales tactics and relationship building and stuff like that. And I spent most of my time driving around Iowa, western Wisconsin, North and South Dakota, Nebraska, which is where I met Becca, actually, my wife. And so I actually loved the business, but it was very difficult to make a living selling the type of products that we sold, which were extremely expensive.
What were you selling?
Carpet, very high-end, niche residential products, and in some cases used in private jets, yachts, high-end hotel rooms like presidential suites, stuff like that.
So was it the area you were trying to sell these products was challenging?
Yeah.
I would assume there'd be more of a market for stuff like that in other areas of the U.S., but maybe not in
like
North
San
Dakota.
Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, Manhattan, places like that. Those were key markets for this, but not in Des Moines, Iowa, which is Omaha, Nebraska, which was where I spent a lot of my time. Yeah.
So that was probably a little bit of a character building experience, like running around, kind of beating your head against the wall, trying to sell.
It was from a financial standpoint. It was I was in a point in my life where I was right out of college, and it was a financial struggle. Had student loans, wasn't making a lot of money, but was working very hard. But I wouldn't say it was character building like the turnaround business in Chicago. It was. I really enjoyed it. I loved the people I called on. They were all very flamboyant, big personalities, interior designers, architects, and the products that I sold were very unique, and so it was fun to present the products. I enjoyed the business, and so when I was in that carpet business, or pardon me, the painting contracting business in Chicago, the turnaround, I missed being in the carpet business, and I always kind of had it in the back of my mind. Wow, man, it would be so much easier and so much more fun to, compete with the big boys in a major metropolitan area like Chicago, where there's an actual demand for the type of products that I was attempting to sell in Ames, Iowa, or Sioux City, South Dakota,
Yeah.
or Sioux Falls, South Dakota, rather. So yeah, that's what I ended up doing. I ended up deciding, well, I'm going to get back into the carpet business, but this time I'm going to do it in Chicago, in a major metropolitan area, which is one of the biggest markets in the U.S. for that type of product. So I did that for a few years, and it was exciting and fun and highly social, and it was a great experience. It was very successful doing that almost immediately. Like, it took about 6 months to get it started, and I was just shocked at how much more easy it was to grow a territory than it was in the territory that I had previously had. But I realized that I wasn't getting closer to the actual business of carpet manufacturing, and so I started reaching out to some of the suppliers that I represented, some of the manufacturers that I represented, and told them I wanted to get into actual manufacturing. I always had a hope that someday I would have my own business, and I thought that by becoming an independent manufacturer's rep that I would have that, but it was just a sales organization. There was nothing that I actually owned that was of value to sell. There was no exit plan, and so I decided to get closer to the manufacturing.
So you wanted to, how long had you wanted to own your own business? Like, was something you'd kind of envisioned early on, or as you got further down the road?
I would say ever since I was in my late teens.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you start going down that road, and how do you get a business started?
Well, I ended up interviewing for a job with several of the companies I represented. Some were on the East Coast, some on the West Coast, some in the South. And I came out to California and interviewed with a company called Fabrica, and met with another mentor of mine. His name's Al Frink, who actually ended up being what was called the manufacturing czar for the Bush administration after the business was sold. And I met with him, and I told him exactly what I just told you. I want to own my own business. I can't do it as a manufacturer's agent. I'd like to come to California, work in whatever role you have available, show my value, and then, maybe after a few years, let's talk about ownership. And he said, that sounds great. Talked to his business partner, who was the other founder, and they told me that they would do what it takes to keep good people, which, in hindsight was a fairly vague statement. And I commenced working. We moved out here, shut my agency down, helped the manufacturers transition to another rep, set that rep up basically with an entire book of business, and moved. And a year later, they sold the business to a public company.
Wait, so what were you doing for the company when you first moved out?
I was a regional manager, so I managed the Western United States. And that's how it remained for about the first year. And then after that, the guy that managed the central part of the United States resigned, and the country was split in half. And so then I had half of the U.S.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so then a year in, they sell?
A year in, they sell. And you can imagine, because of my intentions and the fact that it was known, I was pretty upset. I'd shut down what I was. When I was driving away from Chicago with Becca, I started to cry when I saw the cityscape in my rearview mirror. Driving, I think it's the Highway 90 or something like that. I was really like, wow, this is a big change in my life. I'm really sad to say goodbye to my friends, my customers, the people I had close relationships with, in a city that I absolutely loved living in, to move to California for business. It was not because I wanted to live in California. So a year later, when this happened and all the stress associated with that and becoming an employee, I was pretty upset.
And so what did you, you didn't leave though?
I didn't leave. My primary target from an anger standpoint was Al.
Because you'd felt like he'd deceived you?
Yeah, I did. And I think that they had this plan all along. But my boss was a guy named Royce Renfro, who was hired almost the same week I was. And he was hired, I think, to sell the business.
So they bring you in wanting to own the business, and then bring him in basically to sell it.
Yes. And yeah. Yeah. So
what did you do after? And so it's not like it just got acquired by another. This is a big public company, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say big. It was a small cap public company. I think the market cap at that time was $250 million, traded on the NASDAQ. But definitely a public company, so completely different experience, completely different type of business.
And you're still managing half the U.S. at this point?
At this point, they just expanded it to half the U.S. and I built the beginnings of a relationship with Royce.
And what was the parent? What was the parent company?
The Dixie Group.
And so were they
DXYN? Wouldn't recommend it.
And what?
It's a ticker symbol. Jess is looking at me like she doesn't know what I'm talking about.
What is the Dixie Group do?
Dixie Group was also in the carpet manufacturing business, but was also a yarn supplier. And so the concern at the time was that Fabrica would be left without supply lines because of the consolidation of the industry. So it was a smart move. I just didn't quite understand it at the time.
On Al's part.
On Al and his partner's part.
Yeah.
Al was a half owner. A guy named Scott Gunther was the other half. So they, by being acquired, secured their ability to buy yarn.
Yeah.
Which was pretty important in manufacturing carpet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're on board with this company.
Yeah, so I spent a couple weeks licking my wounds, actually faxed Al kind of an angry letter, and we talked about it, and we hugged it out. I forgave him, and I grew to understand the purpose behind it, and the fact that he couldn't really talk to me about these things are very. You have to keep these things on the DL for morale reasons. And I decided, well, let me maybe approach ownership in a different way. It's a public company, so maybe I can be a shareholder. So I asked for shares, I asked for options and grants, was given them, and then told Royce that he's likely to get fired someday, which is a very common occurrence in that
because
position.
He was basically there to help with the sale of the company?
Because of the job that he had. That's number one. So you're kind of in the crosshairs all the time. And because of the type of person he was. I mean, he was a very in-your-face, aggressive, like, I don't give a shit who you are, I'm going to tell you what I think kind of a guy. And the acquiring company was very much like, whoa, it's Southern, polite. I mean, it was just a giant culture clash. And he was also older, and I don't think he wanted to stay there forever. So I told him, hey, you're not going to live forever. I want your job someday. I'll stay if you teach me how to do it. And he slapped me on the knee, and he looked kind of happy and grateful that somebody had the interest and excited to teach me. It was awesome. It was great. And so he spent the next couple of years making sure that I learned all about operations and all about finance, which were two giant areas of weakness for me. And he said I needed to be really strong at two of the three primary areas of any business, which is marketing, finance, and operations. And so I attempted to learn as much as I possibly could about finance and operations. We literally crawled under the equipment, the machines, spent time with the engineers, operated the machinery, inspected the final products. I mean, I learned everything about, not to the extent that the actual manufacturing people did, but as someone who came in as a part of the sales team, I knew a tremendous amount about how the carpet was actually made. Yeah.
And so, not to give a spoiler alert, but obviously you don't stay at Fabrica forever. So So eventually, did your boss get fired? Did he get fired?
He got fired. And one of the questions that you gave me in advance is what is the big hit, or how did you describe the question? We're about to get to that, like the biggest, like a flagship moment in my career.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal to be the president of a public company, and that was my goal. And I felt like I had the inside track to it, and I felt like I had a great mentor, and I also had a good relationship with the CEO of the parent company. So I was in New York, interviewing for a new sales rep for Long Island, helping my new. I was the VP of sales at this particular time, helping my regional manager on the East Coast find someone and vet the people out. And I got a phone call from the corporate VP of HR in the South, and his name is Derek Davis or something, I think. Calls me up, Southern accent. Todd, we need you to come back to California early. Cut your trip short. I'm like, what? Why? And he goes, can't talk about that right now, but don't tell anyone. I mean, I was scared shitless. I asked him, hey, am I getting fired? Because that's the kind of situation that would call.
Yeah.
For. So, and he said, he kind of chuckled and he goes, no. And I got off the phone and I was, told Becca, and that was it. Kind of freaked out. wanted to talk to Royce, was concerned. Finally, I called Royce on one of the layovers to get back, and I told him I was coming back, and I was freaked out, and I didn't know what was going on. He was furious with me. He's like, "I can't believe you didn't call me and tell me." He told me he got fired.
Oh.
And he was upset that I didn't reach out to him. I said, "Hey, I told him I wouldn't tell anybody. I'm already blowing it right now by breaking my word." And it was a kind of a bittersweet moment. I didn't know that I was getting it. I had no idea what was going on. I assumed that maybe somebody was going to come in from the outside and it was going to be my new boss, and I was going to meet that person and help with the transition. So I got out of the taxi, this before Uber, of course, and walked into the offices at Saturday morning when I landed, and the CEO of the company and the VP of HR were sitting in Royce's old office, and I sat down with them. I'm like, well, "What's going on?" And they said, "Well, we'd like to give you the job. Here's the offer." They laid it out on a single piece of paper, and I was angry, and I was excited. It was a really a kind of a terrible and wonderful moment all rolled into one. I mean, I was honored to get the job because you have to get elected. They cast a vote among the board of directors, and so I was given the opportunity. But I was angry because my mentor was just fired, and I felt like my relationship with Royce, was starting to disintegrate because of this as well. And I didn't know how well I fit into the Dixie Group either, which eventually fell apart anyway in a board meeting that I think I've told you about in the past, where I essentially told them I think they're destroying the business and I can't have my name on this, and I think they should find someone else to do my job or go back to Georgia and continue to take the big fat checks.
Wait, hold on. So you just you just get promoted to president of Fabrica and running and kind of having the job you wanted. And then fast forward how long?
1 year later.
1 year later. And
I was in the boardroom telling them this.
So wait, hold on. What was the issue with the Dixie? What was the problem?
Well, Fabrica was run as a standalone business unit forever. And the Dixie Group owned the company for 5 years until making any changes, until imposing any changes upon the business unit. Fabrica as a separate P&L was performing incredibly well. I mean, we're growing in a very mature industry, so the industry wasn't growing very quickly. We're probably growing at 5 to 10% a year, but our EBITDA was pushing 20 to 23.5% or something like that. It was bouncing around at a very high profitability and growing at the same time. So we were really unusual, a really unusual business from a financial performance standpoint and from a morale standpoint. Like the 400 employees, not all of them obviously, but many of them had almost a religious connection to the business. Like there's a sense of pride. We were kind of on the tip of the spear in terms of quality and fashion in that particular business. And I felt like we were about to lose some of that stuff because of key changes. So
5 years later, after purchasing Fabrica, the Dixie Group starts to get involved and change things.
Yeah. So what happened was Royce was out, and he was sort of viewed as in the way of progress, and I was put in, and then as part of that, me going in, they're like, okay, we're going to change these things now as well, and I was kind of like, okay, well, I'll support, I'll be a team player. I understand why. It's part of the M&A, mergers and acquisitions, for those of you not familiar with that term, playbook to centralize key functions to improve either efficiencies or lower costs. And so finance is typically one that gets centralized, and operations in some cases as well, depending on what the parent company's business is. In this case, they're in our business, and so it seemed like a smart idea to centralize operations, which is manufacturing. Finance wasn't a big deal, but centralizing manufacturing and having an impact on the quality of the actual finished product was really concerning to me, and how it was delivered, and little slight changes over time that you see when a private equity firm takes over a business from a founder, for example, and you're buying, let's say, coffee beans from that founder, and suddenly the coffee beans aren't quite the same. They're like, you're like,
Yeah.
this doesn't quite taste the same, or the packaging changes, and you're like, oh, this seems a little cheaper. Those are all indicators of declining consumer value. And in our situation, we were charging like 5 times the industry average. And I was really concerned that we would not have the ability to charge that any longer, and we were going to start to crater on the top line. And, of course, the bottom line would just get destroyed because of the high overhead nature of the business. So, and in a public company, it is literally public. Like, it's me. This is what I did for you guys kind of a situation, and I didn't want my name on it. I also didn't want to be a part of something I didn't really fully believe in, because my approach to leadership is, hey, look at me. I love this. I'm willing to do it. I really believe in this thing. Come and follow me. It works pretty well. And all of a sudden I felt like, whoa. I don't believe in this. I can't do that. Like, how am I going to get all of these people to follow me when I don't really believe it? That's really concerning. I can't do it. I felt like I didn't have a choice. Like, some people say, well, that was really courageous to go into a boardroom like that and tell the board of directors and the entire corporate management team that you were all wrecking the business and I'm out. But it really wasn't. I didn't really have a choice. I shared the presentation with Becca, which is about 45 minutes long, the night before. And she's like, wow, you're going to get fired. And I remember thinking, well, I've got maybe a 5% shot of surviving this. That's worth it. So I went in and the experience was it was surreal, I would guess. And it was like time slowed down. I remember I was on the far end of this long conference table, and it was a PowerPoint presentation. I was clicking through my slides and telling the story I just told you, but in detail. And I remember seeing Wayne Hedger, who is the VP of operations. He's a mechanical engineer with his bald head down and beads of sweat like running down the top of his head. I can kind of see him glistening off of the lighting in the boardroom. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, he's sweating like that. This is not going very well. and then out of my peripheral vision, just to my right, was Dan Frierson. He's the CEO of the Dixie Group, and he has these. He's really a sweet Southern gentleman kind of a guy, but this giant red bulbous nose and these long red earlobes, and they look like they were vibrating, and more red than usual.
Oh my gosh!
So, and I was 30. I was really young. I was 36, and these guys were all, 50, 60, 70 years old, and I'm like, wow, this is kind of scary and awesome at the same time. So
you give this presentation, and then
that night we had a cocktail party, and Dan, I'll never forget this. Dan walked over to me and stuck his hand out, almost like a politician shakes your hand. And he looked at me and goes, Todd, the board and I, we're concerned about the level of maturity you exhibited at the meeting today, but we'll talk about that when you get back from China. I had a trip to China the next day.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, okay. He said, well, don't worry about it. We'll work it out. But we need to have a talk. I'm like, okay. I didn't put any more thought into that. Went to China. A week later, came back. Monday morning, 8 o'clock West Coast time. My secretary buzzed me, and her name is Shirley. I'm like, hi, Shirley. She goes, hey, Dan's on the phone for you. Pick up the phone. Todd, we've decided to replace you. That was it.
That was it.
We met at the
No
Balboa
fanfare.
Bay Club. Nope. He's like, we'll meet you at the Balboa Bay Club tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Derek and I will be there, the VP of HR. They had the severance package ready to be signed,
but you would obviously, when you decided to deliver this presentation, you'd kind of made your peace with the fact that this might happen.
Yeah, and I kind of thought, because of the challenges with the cultural differences of the companies, that it was a short-term thing anyway. But I still wanted the job. You know what I mean? I wanted that accomplishment. And once I had the job, I was like, okay, can I make this work or not? Because then I care about all these people. I mean, I didn't have close relationships with 400 employees, but I had close relationships with 20 or 30.
Yeah.
And I cared about them, and I wanted to see them succeed. And but I didn't think Royce sort of was like protecting the gate. And as he used to describe it, actually, use these words: the barbarians are at the gate. The only way we keep them out is with performance. So we would perform, and they would stay away, and he would threaten them, and and they'd be all upset about it, and eventually, of course, he was removed.
So you're pretty young. You're
36.
36 at the time, and you just get fired. What do you do?
Well, I take my box of stuff with, just like in the movies, one of those little banker boxes, pile all my stuff in there, family photos, like framed photos sticking out of the top and stuff. And just walking down the hallway, and people are coming out of their cubicles and things. And they're like, bye, Todd, coming out and hugging me, and, tears. And with I'm sure some people were happy. Some people were a little teary-eyed. And the main IT guy met me on the stairs, and he goes, where's your laptop? And I said, it's in the office. He reached past my box, like above my box, and hugged my neck, kind of, because the box was kind of between us. It was kind of awkward. He's like, I wish you luck. It was a sad thing. Walked to it was maybe 10 a.m., so there wasn't a lot of activity in the parking lot. Just walked alone to my car and drove home. Got home. We had a new house. Becca was pregnant with Lizzie, who's now 12. And got home, and I'm like, well, it happened. That's it. And we just decided we were in a position financially where I didn't have to go back to work. We'd actually started investing in real estate in Chicago and exchanged the properties into California real estate. And it grew like crazy for, 8 years. And
so you have enough. So all this time when you are working at Fabrica, and previously you'd been saving money, investing in real estate, building a real estate portfolio, and then at 36 you basically just sort of are okay with being forced into retirement.
Yeah. I was concerned about the impact of all the travel on my family, and I was faced with this. Giving up a job that I really loved and was proud to have, and the money that came with it, in contrast with what I needed to do for my family. And suddenly I was like, well, I'm in a position where I don't have to go back to work, so I'm not going to, because, I'm going to spend time with the kids and spend time with Becca and do things that I enjoy. I sacrificed a lot. I mean, I worked all the time.
So, obviously, I know you're not still retired because I work for you now.
Yeah.
So what happens between the choice to never not go back to work and then now?
Well, a lot. Not much happened for 5 years. It was board shorts and flip-flops and kite surfing 4 days a week. It was really fun. It was nice. I had very low stress, and I expanded our real estate portfolio and diversified it as well, but all within the real estate sector. So I got into some new construction, bought some land, did some things that I had no experience in doing. And some of it worked and some of it didn't work. But then in 2008, when the real estate bubble hit, I tried to scramble for a couple years past that. And essentially during that scramble, like trying to find a way to make money while, some people were making a lot of money, but most were losing everything, and I was one of the latter. So after 2 years, lost everything but $60,000.
Wow.
It was a horrible.
So all your properties, everything.
Yeah. We had to sell. We got rid of everything, and then I was putting my resume together. This is really a horrible time. Told Becca she had to go to work. She hadn't worked for, I think, maybe 12 years or something like that, 10 years. So she wasn't very happy about that. She wasn't very happy with me in general. And I remember I had a beautiful home office, and I remember sitting there, and I started getting a little teary-eyed because this is weird. I need to get my estrogen levels checked. Lizzie was I think she was 2, and she walked around the corner, and she climbed up into my lap, and she put her fat little hands on my cheeks to console me, because I was sobbing because I was finally coming to grips with the reality of such a big part of what made up my identity at the time, which was my success, gone. It was just gone, and I felt like I had to start again. And so she climbed up into my lap, and put her nose against my nose. I mean, she obviously doesn't remember this because she was too little. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I've really hit rock bottom. My 2-year-old is consoling me. It's not supposed to be that way, you know. And so I, turned my desk around and faced my computer and I started putting my resume together, and came to the, accepted the fact that I had to interview for the first time since I had to try to get interviews for the first time since I was in college. After college, it was easy. People came to me. Opportunities landed in my lap. There were no opportunities at this point, so it was rough. And I took a break, walked out into my backyard, was standing in my jacuzzi. And by the way, I was also, I think, in the middle of a midlife crisis because I had long hair. Tyler, you remember that? And I remember standing in my jacuzzi, and the water was like up to my thighs or something like that. And I was looking out over there was a golf course behind the house, and past that was the Pacific Ocean. And it was a beautiful view, beautiful day, and the warm air was blowing through my hair. And I remember thinking to myself, this is it. We're not going to have this much longer. I have to accept this. And my BlackBerry rang, and it was, I'm simplifying some of the details so they're not exactly accurate, just to consider time. But basically, Brad Davidson, my ex-business partner, contacted me and told me he was going to shut his business down and wanted help to turn it around, and knew that I was looking for something. And so I jokingly told him I'd clear my schedule, and came out and met with him and Christina Casper, who was his only employee at the time. He had like 0.25 employees, and talked all about how I'd be happy to help him turn it around, but that I'd probably have to leave and move at some point to New York or Georgia, because that's where the industry was based that I had so much experience in. And I'd be happy to help him in the meantime. A month later, cleaned up the books, and told him that I'd like to stay. Let's make a partnership. And so we did. And I came home and talked to Becca about it. She was not very happy because she asked me, well, what's your income going to look like? And I said, nothing. There's no money. But I think I can make something of this. And I had the same kind of hubris or arrogance that I've had forever, pretty much, where I've got a lot of humility today that I didn't have back then, even after losing all of that, thinking that I can just step into a business and turn it into something beautiful in a fairly short order. And it wasn't the case in this situation. So
you get linked in with Brad. You kind of sort of like consult or offer to help him, and then decide you want to go into business with Brad.
Yeah.
And then that is essentially the beginnings of what it is you're doing now, which is
It's
Stark.
the beginning of Stark. Yep. Yeah, so we shut his brand down, changed the focus of the business from young athletes to older guys and women like me, and moved to Irvine, and opened up on January 1st of 2011.
So tell us what Stark does.
Well, Stark creates personalized health and fitness solutions primarily for business owners, business leaders, and a handful of athletes as well.
And what makes Stark unique?
Well, to go back in time to the early days, one of the this is very, very unique at Stark, but not unique in any other business, and particularly in manufacturing, in that Brad was a personal trainer, which means in the personal training industry, he sells packages of training sessions, he writes workouts, he potentially, depending on how sophisticated that personal trainer is, writes nutrition plans, is somewhat orthopedically knowledgeable, and then coaches takes you through the plan over time as well. So that's a lot of different people in other businesses. Like at Fabrica, that would be like 4 different people. Like I would never have, for example, a member of the sales team work in the accounting department.
Yeah,
that's kind of what you get with personal trainers. You usually get a great salesperson, but you don't get a great technical person, or you get a great technical person as a personal trainer, but they're not successful because they can't sell.
So, but essentially, this is what you have, right? Because what you and Brad started was a personal training business.
This is what we have. And so I talked to Brad about this and attempted to carve him up in several different pieces, with him doing the most sophisticated, complex part of the job, which was at that particular point assessing someone's ability to move and writing a workout program around that, and assessing their goals or understanding their goals and writing a nutrition plan to support that. And then we hired people to just do the coaching portion of the job. And then as we grew, we hired one person that specialized in just writing programs, one person that just specialized in writing nutrition plans, another person that did what we now call the preview, which is explaining what the future plan looks like, and then the coaches. And so it's specialization. And that was the first. I think we're one of the few companies around the country that operates like that. But it allowed us to improve the quality of each of those specializations over time, and scale up as well. So it was pretty unique from that standpoint. But what makes us unique today is the fact that we also have doctors and chiropractors on staff that are fully integrated in our process. And when I say integrated, I don't mean that they're in the building, because that does not make us very unique. When I say integrated, I mean they're actually collaborating on the work product to make sure that the consumer of Stark's services gets the very best possible outcome available. And that means that there's conflict, debate, and then the eventual outcome is something much better than you can otherwise get. And selfishly speaking, there's more rapid professional development in this environment because of the debate. For instance, in the MD world, you'll get a radiology practice, and they're all radiologists, and they're all talking radiology language. And then after a surgery that they're in part involved with, the baton gets passed from, let's say, the orthopedic surgeon to the physical therapist, and then the physical therapist takes over, and the radiologist is completely out of it. The orthopedic surgeon is out of it until there's a follow-up appointment, out of the process, that is, and the physical therapist completely takes control over the relationship. There's very little communication. The physical therapist glances at the chart and then creates a new one. And then the patient follows up with the orthopedic surgeon. The orthopedic surgeon says, "Hey, you're looking good. You're done." And the dude limps out because the guy had knee surgery, and accepts that it's never going to quite be the same. Well, I don't think that's good enough. That would be like Fabrica in the carpet industry rolling out a product that just the VP of marketing had control over, and there was no connection to the entire rest of the business, which would be, can this be manufactured? Is it going to be profitable? Is it going to enhance the brand? Just by virtue of how beautiful it is. And it'd be incredibly risky to do that, and it would never be done. Our bodies are much more complex than a piece of carpet. And so I never really understood, well, why is this the way it is? It's not good enough. It should be better, because of my experiences in my past businesses, knowing that it can be better in other businesses when you have people that have they think that they're providing the same outcome, which in our case it's health. The doctor, the chiropractor, the personal trainer, the nutritionist, they all have that. Like, I'm with this student, which was our vernacular for clients, by the way. I have this student, and I'm going to enhance that person's health. But they see the world through completely different lenses, and therein lies the value. That collaboration and the conflict and the sweaty armpit conversations, the debate that happens in the background, is what makes Stark so unique. The disagreements in the approach.
So, for the sake of time, real quick, let's jump towards, what does the future of Stark look like?
Well, we're going to change the future of health and fitness. That's our purpose. What it looks like more tactically speaking is we are going to continue to provide exactly the same services that we have currently, which is chiropractic care, NMD type services like labs and IV therapy, prolotherapy and PRP, regenerative injection therapy, cryotherapy, anything related to taking an individual that sees him or herself as healthy and they want to become the very best version of themselves, anything that's connected to that, we will provide. That's what the future looks like for Stark.
And what about growth?
Well, growth. We're now expanding to our second location. The target date for opening is in January. It'll be somewhere in the Newport Beach area. The third location will hopefully come about a year later, and then after that one is both of the new locations are sound and stable financially. We're going to recapitalize and expand to 30. That's the plan.
Awesome. So before we wrap up, we're going to do the muzzle load round, which is not that fast, not quite rapid fire, but we'll move more quickly through these. So what have you accomplished in your business that you're most proud of?
I think being a co-founder at Stark is by far the thing I'm most proud of, and I'm most proud of that because the business needed $75,000. I borrowed $35,000 from a couple of buddies at 20% interest, by the way.
Good buddies.
So how friendly are they? Yeah. But the other $42,000 came from the $60,000 we had left. And so that was a really scary, big risk, basically creating this business out of nothing, and seeing it today and the families and the lives that we're impacting positively, all the stockholders, stakeholders, which would be the employees, the team, and the students that we serve. I'm most proud of that.
If you could go back in time, what would you tell the younger version of yourself?
I would tell the younger version of Todd, slow down and be more careful. Don't be so cocky. Lean on advisors much more. Don't get too wrapped up in the thrill of trying to figure it out on your own. And I would probably tell my 50-year-old self when I'm 70 the same thing. Yeah.
What are you reading, listening to, or subscribed to currently for personal or professional development?
I think the primary one right now is, I'm a big fan of podcasts. The primary one, because they're so efficient. The primary one I'm focused on right now is the Gary Vaynerchuk podcast, the Gary V Show, I think it's called.
Gary V audio experience?
Oh, yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. And I'm listening to that because we're very focused right now on penetrating further on all of our social media platforms. And he is really good at kind of painting a picture as to what the future looks like. And that part of marketing changes so rapidly. I find it almost impossible to keep tabs on it, but he helps with that.
Cool.
Yeah.
What habits, routines do you have? Obviously, I know you and you have lots of them, but what are a couple foundational habits and routines you have to kind of stay on top of your game? Well,
because time's an issue right now, let's focus on one. I think the most fundamental habit that I have is to plan out what I want to accomplish in a year, and imagine that like there are no self-imposed limitations, no self-limiting beliefs. So attempt to remove all those. Like I'm sitting on Santa's knee, and after I determine what those are and make sure that they're clear and they're written down, I have a process to break them all the way down to what I'm going to do on Tuesday. And cool. I do that. So I do that annually. I do it monthly, and I do it weekly.
Wow, awesome. All right. And if people want to get a hold of you,
well, you can certainly find us on our website, which is www.starklife.us. And you can also find me on the Instagram at Testosterone.
Testosterone.
And of course, Stark has all the links on the website for the various social media platforms as well.
And we also, for anyone interested more in the health and fitness side, we have another podcast that we run out of Stark.
Oh, Stark Naked Radio. I can't forget about that.
Yeah.
We record that weekly, and it's not only entertaining but informational.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Todd, thanks for sharing, and enjoy the rest of the workday.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Today's episode was produced by the talented Jessica Watts. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Also, for more content, follow us on Instagram at Sea Life Podcast, or check out our Facebook page, The Sea Life. And last but not least, if you're into health and fitness, be sure and check out our other podcast, Stark Naked Radio.